Hey, good afternoon to everyone out there watching Operation Warp Drive, special Halloween edition. Today's guest has spent a lifetime turning chaos into campaign plans and war games into wisdom. Colonel retired Kevin Benson is a
Can I
man who's
quote you
seen
on that?
strategy. Absolutely, sir. Colonel Benson is a man who's seen strategy from every angle, from the sands of Iraq to the seminar rooms of Fort Leavenworth. West Point grad, Sam's director, and PhD historian. He's helped shape the way the Army thinks about thinking. He's written for every serious military journal that matters, but don't let the footnotes fool you. He's also a storyteller with grit, humor, and hard earned perspective. His latest work, Expectation of Valor, captures that blend perfectly. Please welcome a soldier scholar who's made a career out of asking the hard question: what happens after the plan meets reality?
Oh man, that was a
Wow.
great intro.
Hey,
Well,
hey,
I hope I can live up to that. Jiminy Cricket.
Man, I tell you what. Hey, sir, welcome aboard. I mean, Matt really set the stack up pretty high for you. And our band director, Chief Whitey, is the guy who usually intros that. But Chief, I think you're going to have some competition, man.
well, I had something good written, but it's the last one, and Matt has finally embraced all the AI discussions that we've had on this the last year. So I can tell where the assistance is coming from, and I'm glad that he has taken this seriously over this time.
All
Yeah.
all all credit goes to the chief of Chatsillery, ChatGPT. Yes.
Yes. Yes, that's
Golly.
incredible. Well, Kevin, we are excited to have you. Welcome again to Operation Warp Drive. I know you and Matt have talked about this already, but this is our place where we renew the profession, have dialogue about how hard it is to write, which uh, it goes hand in hand with a lot of stuff that you've done with making plans. I mean, it's pretty exciting stuff. Being a part, I'm highly interested in hearing about your tales and woes and challenges and successes of like how you guys wrote the Seaflick order for going into Iraq uh, and getting after it. So
I told you we had a special spooky edition. So sir, there you go. Colonel Hildebrand, are you back, sir? Okay, sir. So I'll lead it off while Colonel Hildebrand works it. As we've highlighted in your intro, you've been in the room for some of the biggest planning efforts in modern military history, and now you've written about them in your book. When did you realize that the story behind that planning effort was something that was worth telling and getting out to the masses?
Well, I got to tell you, in 2011, when I came back from Iraq the second time, um, I went over in 2010. This is after I retired. Um, General Austin at the time asked me to come back to help write the plan on how to depart Iraq. And a very good friend of mine, now retired Lieutenant General Burke Garrett, wrote me and said, Kevin, what's it going to take to get you to come over to Baghdad? After all, you got us into this mess. The least you could do is help us get out. So, with that sort of a challenge, I had to go. When I came back after that experience, I attended um, a meeting at the U.S. Institute of Peace,
mhm.
and I expected to give a talk on how we crafted that plan, that order. Actually, it wasn't a plan; it was an order, because we were going to leave Iraq by December of 2011, and all of the scheduled presenters were preempted by uh, General Odierno, who gave an amazing talk. But in it, he said that in 2002, 2003, ill informed planners put commanders in positions where they only had bad choices. Um, and I almost spontaneously combusted. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
uh, and I'd written a manuscript based on my journals by then, but I'd put it aside because I couldn't find a publisher. But after that moment, and Ray Odierno and I were at the academy together. I loved Ray. He is a good man, but boy, that just ticked me off.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
resumed my effort and plugged away, and finally found a publisher in the great folks at Casemate Publishing, and then went through the process of revising, editing, and then finally getting the book published. But that was the spark. It really was.
Hmm.
I was very weary of hearing, Army general officers and other people say that we had no plan for what to do after we got to Baghdad, because I knew that was malarkey. Um, and it just seemed to me, said, well, maybe you didn't read the plan that we wrote,
Oh, goodness.
General. Uh, but that really was the spark right there, honest to God.
Yeah. Wow. It
Well,
sounds like you just picked up the gauntlet and say, challenge accepted.
Indeed.
well, now we know who is responsible for the order that then 36 ID USD South used to execute off of in 2010, 2011.
That's right. Operation
Yep.
Order 11-01.
Yep.
Because I never got down to Basra when y'all were there. But I know that some of your folks were in the ballroom at the palace when we did our How to Get Out of Iraq war game in December of 2010. So
It was not I. I was pulling a shift in the dock as a lonely first lieutenant. So, but that's awesome.
so that's where it was. And getting back to the book itself, I started the habit of keeping a journal when I was a lieutenant, before any of you all were born. Um, and the reason I did was because I was called as a witness to a court martial, and the prosecuting attorney told me that journals can be used as aid memoirs in court. And I thought, boy, maybe, given some of the troops that I was dealing with, the old adage about you spend 99% of your time on 1% of your troops.
Right.
I was
Yep.
I was keeping a journal, and I've still got those. Those handy little famous green notebooks.
Yeah.
I
So
just got in the habit.
you still journal today, Kevin? Like, is that a routine that you follow religiously?
Not anymore. I stopped when I was after I retired, except for when I went back to Baghdad 2010, 2011. I've got those journals. Uh, Mostly right now, what I do, honestly, I write a weekly letter to my brother and sisters,
Yeah, there you go.
just to keep in touch.
Yeah, but it keeps you sharp though too, right? I mean,
Well, yeah,
one of these talents that everyone wants to be that good writer. Everyone wants to have that, like, hey, maybe even achieve that pithy statement or that bold acclamation. But it's the routine business of, like, for example, when you're a lieutenant, it's just keeping a journal, writing daily, getting the reps. And
you're exactly right. Among other things, and again, that was a great NCO. Advised us in the basic course, that, hey, look, Lieutenant, LT, you need to know things like, when was, Private Sixpack's last dental check? Uh, who's taken leave, shoe sizes, who's got pay problems, who's married, who's not, all of those things. And I just started to capture stuff like that. Um, and then, when the support platoon doesn't show up on the range at the time you expect with the ammo, and you can't start, shooting when range control tells you, write that down. Okay, what should I have done better? What the hell happened here? And all that kind of stuff. And it just grew from that. It really did. But you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, writing was never easy. you know, I I kept on hearing, the voice of Sister Louis Bertrand in my head from Catholic grade school, knocking my wrist about diagramming a sentence and then using a sentence outline before you start writing anything, uh, and that's what I did.
Sir, have you always been a writer, or is that something that you felt a calling to as you saw things and wanted to get it out to everyone, or is it something that you've always done?
It is a habit that I grew into, in all candor. Like I said, I would write letters when I was at the academy to my mom and dad, to my girlfriend, who's now my wife. But other than that, um, once I got on active duty, and I just wanted to record things so that I would remember, like things that happened when I was a platoon leader and I got to be a company commander. Boy, I'm not going to screw this up. Um, Things that happened when I was a company commander. I said, boy, when I get to be a battalion S3, I'm not going to screw things up like this. And it just sort of built on that. So that everywhere I went, I would record things that happened. Somebody said something funny, amazing incidents that would occur. I'd write it down. Um, and again, it was mostly just so I wouldn't forget things. Uh, Later on, and really, I started to write articles for Armor magazine. Uh, at least I tried to. They were always very kindly rejected, until I started to write book reviews, which were accepted, which was a process of writing. And then those were accepted, and then I dabbled again into writing articles for Armor, and then Military Review and Parameters. As I grew in experience and in gained rank and get a different perspective on things, trying to stay aware of the profession, like I read in the papers that your CG put out, trying to maintain an awareness, and especially a situational awareness of where I was in our Army, and observations I felt I could make because of my experience and my education. It really came to fruition when I went to SAMS, and the School of Advanced Military Studies. And our director at the time, Colonel Jim McDonough challenged us. He said that the return on investment for the Army is what you do after you graduate. And he said, we expect you to observe, process what you saw, and write. So participate in the revisions of doctrine that would come out every once in a while. You go on an operation or an exercise, because I didn't go to war until I was a colonel. Uh, so a battle command training program exercise, or a national training center, or CMTC rotation. What happened? Reflect on it, write on it, uh, propose changes to doctrine. It just became a part of what I wanted to do, to give back to our Army.
Yeah. Hey, that's good stuff. Our RCG, Major General Brad Bowen, he often says, "Hey, we have to figure out how to be leaders of innovation, not just consumers of innovation."
Yeah.
And I think you called it observe, participate, right, but like that's really what we're getting after. And if you think about as I think about what you just said and make this observation, right, is how do we encourage young people out there to kind of get the young force who have these insights, who have this idea of innovations and technology, how to get them to participate. We obviously are doing this program, we offer writing competitions, but you felt compelled and you had that spark. What compelled you as a lieutenant to write those reviews for Armor magazine? And it was, hey, first you hit failure, right? Hey, they didn't accept my article. So how do I get past failure? How do I get over that hump? Right. And so you started saying, hey, this is a book review. And so I kind of imagined as you were saying that, I was like, well, what was the difference between his failure and success? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? Were you required to do a little bit more like was it the research? I mean, was it the stylistic approach? Was like, as you revisit those memories and think about like what
Mhm.
made you successful, what like, how would you separate that failure from your success and how you got to kind of go over that hump as a writer?
Well, again, in all candor, I felt that, after the first couple of articles were rejected,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I felt, okay, I need to go back and read more
Sure.
and read published works. Excuse me. Who's getting published in Armor magazine, for example? What's the style that those officers were using? Look at books. And read military history and okay, look at the style. Okay, how is that being communicated? Remember, Sister Louis Bertrand, where's the sentence outline? Okay, go back to the drawing board and do that. And I just kept on plugging away. And to get to get that first hit, if it's World Series time, so maybe I can use a baseball analogy.
Yeah, yeah.
After batting, perfect, zero, to get that first hit, I just picked a book. I don't even remember which one it was. I suppose I should be able to rattle it off. But a book that had come out that I'd bought and I'd read, and I looked at Armor magazine. Okay, how does it look? There's a word limit, a couple of hundred words. Okay, let me try to catch the essence of the book, and submitted it to Armor, and lo and behold, it was accepted. And I was okay. Now I feel good about myself. I did get something accepted to Armor. I'll keep on doing that and keep on trying.
Yeah.
But that's just being
That's cool.
persistent. It
Yeah.
really was.
Yeah, learn by modeling, right? You saw what was successful for those other writers, and you're like, hey,
Exactly.
I can do that. I mean, that seems
Yes.
simple enough. And then you build that bridge, and you're like, hey, I've done this before. I got that, and you get that you kind of get that, that little adrenaline feed. Like, hey, you got that email back or that letter back. Hey, you're going to get published. Like, woohoo, heck yeah, let's go after this. And
Yeah,
so
it
then you
was
get
it
really
was a letter because this was before it was BC, before computers.
yeah,
You know,
that's awesome.
I think it's very interesting, right? Like, listen to you talk, right? I'm the AI guy, right? I'm the technology guru, but the verbiage and stuff that you're saying is literally the command prompts that, right? This whole how you talk to AI and how you analyze stuff. And it'd be interesting, right? You were doing it the old fashioned way, literally the pen and paper way. About let me go read a book and make your own discussions where, where you, right, with today's writers, like, right, I'm probably the worst writer of the group, which, like, go figure, is where you can say, hey, look at this book. I got this from it. Hey, AI, you analyzing, what do you think? Look at, right, is there any hidden messages? Is there any hidden tones? What did I miss? And then how can I improve? And even, like, what is the general writing style in military magazine right now? How can I
Mhm.
improve my paper, my stuff off of this? You're talking about doing all the journals and everything. I mean, it literally is how we can, like, how we evolve as a military much faster and be more responsive. And how can we, right, take all these unknowns and start kind of codifying all of them? It's interesting to hear you say it, like exactly what you're saying. You were originally the old school way. Everything was, right, snail mail. And so to see how y'all are still able to be successful without some of these tools, and whereas we become those users of innovation, how do we start teaching those tools to be smarter the military way? It's just interesting to see that. Like, my mind is like, I'm excited right now.
Well, thanks. My work here is done, I guess. I'm really interested in since I'm here. I live in Lansing, Kansas, right outside of Fort Leavenworth, and friends of mine are still teaching at the School of Advanced Military Studies. But I note that SAMS and the Staff College are starting to make more and more use of artificial intelligence enabled devices uh, in the craft of doing estimates, of writing orders, of proposing courses of action, the process is exactly what you were saying. Uh,
Mhm.
the how do we educate the device to help us better, to produce better products and faster? The whole process of pattern analysis to determine, okay, where's the bad guy going to show up next? It reminded me a lot of, again, one of the amazing experiences I had was there was an Israeli brigadier, Shimon Nave, who talked to the School of Advanced Military Studies when I was the director about what he called systemic operational design, and the process of that method and the thinking that he was encouraging was to study ourselves, to study the enemy, and to realize, what are factors that play on both of us, and therefore we can determine what's the range of an enemy's response, and then develop a course of action for us that allows us to respond faster, and therefore by that continual learning process and the speed and pace of operations to continually limit an enemy's option until we've got him boxed in and we know there's only one thing he can do. Well, two, he can die or he can surrender. And it was really powerful, and it kind of fed into this whole idea about the man-machine interface that I keep on reading about, and all this military science fiction that I like to read too, about how you sit down at a table that, hey, I'm going to propose this, and you draw a course of action, and the device analyzes it for you and spits out all the stuff that we used to do, stubby pencil drill of consumption rates, casualty rates, KIA, WIA, return to duty, all that kind of stuff, and have that at hand so you can really analyze courses of action quickly.
Yeah.
But it's really powerful. And again, it comes back to, I think, to return to Colonel Hildebrand's, your thoughts about writing more effectively, producing a better product. So because the purpose of writing is to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really is. When I was in SAMS, we got to read things that Ulysses Grant wrote, his overall guidance to all of his subordinate, what we would call now field armies, and to focus that effort on what are we going to do to the Confederacy. And it was really powerful because this man could write really well. He didn't use terms mission command, but we do now. And it really was along those lines of the general intent of what I want you to do. And there's that whole notion of disciplined initiative, where it doesn't mean anyone who displays initiative gets disciplined. It's setting left and right limits but within that zone, here's my goal, here's what I want you to do, get after it, keep me informed. But that comes from being able to write well.
Yeah, man, I love this. This conversation. I got so much to unpack there, brother. I'm just going to start simple though. So, like obviously you've got some incredible experiences writing operations order. You mentioned reading about Ulysses S. Grant and writing the commander's intent for field armies. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of like writing an operation order? Because I mean, let's say granted, a lot of our folks are busy, right? And they're not going to be able to write that article they want to write because it's just on the back burner and they can't get after it. But a lot of our folks have the daily business, the daily grind of having to write that operation order. Well, that too takes effective writing, effective communication. Can you share a little bit some of the experiences? Like, hey, this is some of the research I had to do. This is how I try to write a commander's intent. Keep it pithy, keep it smart, keep focus on key tasks. Or this is how you kind of write, like when you focus on a scheme of maneuver. Can you add some ad lib on that a little bit, Kevin?
Of course. So, commander's intent. Here again, I have a perfect batting average. Every commander's intent I proposed to a commanding general was nodded nicely. Nice try, Kevin. shut up, I'll do this myself. But that was my goal, to get the boss to write it himself. Uh, so what I learned there was to pay attention to my boss. I mean, I had the privilege of working for some really amazing officers. General Fred Franks was my division commander. And I was a battalion operations officer. And just to read what he wrote, and then read his commander's intents in operations orders, back in the Cold War. Okay, to get a sense of how he was thinking, how he viewed the battlefield. And then working directly after I graduated from SAMS, Lieutenant General Gary Luck, Lieutenant General Hugh Shelton. I worked for Colonel Skip Sharp, who retired as a 4-star. Then, of course, Lieutenant General Dave McKiernan, my CG at the land component. Getting to know those men, seeing how they think, allowed me to write proposed. And of course, what's the doctrinal format for, because doctrine is our common language. And so I would write in accord with what our doctrine suggested as, the purpose, the method, the end state, or purpose, key tasks, end state, but give the boss something to think about that was in the ballpark. There's that baseball analogy again, of the way I understood him to think. And that served him well. That was my caveat when I was director: learn how to think like a commander. Never, ever believe you are thinking for the commander, because that is the height of hubris. And I told all the SAMS folks that were my students that I would break your lightsaber if it comes to the fact that you think you're thinking for your commander. But learn to think like a commander. The same thing with the courses of action. And there, again, it comes back to doctrine. We have to really understand what's the ultimate purpose of an operation. Where do we want the division, the corps, the army, or the battalion, or the brigade to end up at the end of a particular phase of an operation? The best schooling I ever got on intent was when I was a major in SAMS. And at the time, there was a program for brigadier generals and major generals who were going to go into division command that was run by the commandant of the Command and General Staff College. And these officers would come in, they'd spend about 2 weeks at Leavenworth to get up to date on current doctrine. But the highlight of that was an MC, well, it was at the time, it was a Battle Command Training Program, BCTP, now MCTP, exercise where the generals were given situations and what would their orders be. And our director of SAMS at the time, recognizing an amazing opportunity, in the truest sense of that wonderful British term, seconded a couple of majors in the majors program in SAMS to work for these general officers. I got to work for Brigadier General Huba Vastasega, who was the founder of SAMS, and then Major General Steve Arnold, who went on to command the 10th Mountain Division, and then 3rd Army when I got to work for him again. I wrote a proposed intent right from doctrine to give to General Arnold for one of these BCTP exercises. And General Arnold's very kind. He read it and he kind of smiled and said, "Oh, that's not bad, Kevin, for a guy who doesn't know me." And Vastasega took it. Yeah, it was great. He was very kind. And Vastasega took it and he said, "Here, Kevin, here, think about this." And right there, he wrote out an intent that was a true intent, which hit the purpose of the operation. And then so Vastasega, one of the smartest soldier scholars I've ever met. Then, we sat down over a beer later on that night, and he said, here's the real purpose of intent. Because again, he'd written the 1982 version of 100-5,
Yeah.
where we started to talk about commander's intent, seriously. And he said intent should capture the real purpose so that when the jamming kicks on and the nuke burst happens or whatever, and you don't know what else to do, if you go back and focus on the purpose, that will guide you. You'll do the right thing at whatever level of command you're at. Remember when I first heard about intent, it was, know the intent 2 levels up. So that as my brigade commander, when I was a company commander, just thought that was funnier than all get out. And he would always quiz his company commanders. Well, what's my intent? And we, of course, you better know the answer to that question. But in a funny way, but he was trying to get that point across. What's the ultimate purpose? Where does that fit in? And again, that comes back to good writing, which is why I focused on that part of learning how to write as well as I could to communicate effectively. And again, forgive me for being long-winded, but that comes back to writing orders.
Yeah.
And then the linkage of writing orders to wargaming. When you all were down in Basra and up in Baghdad, we were trying to figure out how we were going to conduct what General Austin called the operational maneuver out of Iraq. Because I wanted to, I went to him and I said, well, clearly, all the history I've read, boss, this is going to be a withdrawal under pressure and a doctrinal term. And he goes, no, we're not going to use with the word withdrawal. I say, I understand. Now there's the policy level coming in. And, the administration at the time did not want to even have that word in anyone's lexicon. We were handing over and maneuvering out. And they go, no, there's another lesson. Understand the dynamics of the larger picture, at least from where you're sitting. So we operational maneuver out. So what does that mean? How do we stage or phase a withdrawal or an operational maneuver out? And what language do we use? So here again, in that instance, 2 levels below where we were was a division. So we would war game. How did we envision a division conducting operations to first hand over security operations and training and then conduct its operational maneuver out of the country? Because ultimately we were writing to these division commanders and we had to give them tasks in correct doctrinal language that did not limit their initiative. So again, it comes back to who you working for, who's working for him or her.
Yeah.
What's the correct doctrinal language? How do you write to communicate that effectively? And by the process of wargaming, that gives you an extended understanding, at least a start point for understanding of what it is we're about to do.
Yeah.
All of which has to be communicated in writing.
And that's a fine balance. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the headquarters has to figure out how to not limit the options of subordinate commanders, but at the same time give them enough direct guidance so they stay within the left and right limits of what you want them, what the purpose is, right? So it's
Exactly.
hard. It's hard work. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've
But again,
consumed
that
you.
comes back to
Yeah.
thinking like a commander.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I guess I would say being exposed to some of that nuanced information, like the political landscape of saying that we're withdrawing versus, operational maneuver. And if you aren't exposed to that, or if you don't hear that, then you don't necessarily know that that's a consideration that needs to be taken into, what it is that you're writing in the order. Hearing from the commander at echelon himself or herself is obviously extremely important in MDMP and orders production process. But I think if you're not exposed to the information, then you don't necessarily know it's even a consideration.
Mhm. Yeah.
See, I would offer that's also another part of operations that you all will have to conduct, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around uh, because we see it. It's the information domain, if I may use that term.
Mhm.
And how do we and not only explain our operations to our subordinate headquarters in terms they can understand that don't limit those subordinate commanders' initiatives, but how do we explain it to, and now here we go, that former director of SAMS is going to start talking about that Clausewitz and the Trinity.
Yeah.
But we, as soldiers of the Republic, have to explain to the American people what we are doing in their name
Mhm.
to sustain their support. And that has to be a part of how we conduct operations. How do we, because, we don't do propaganda against the American people.
Mhm.
We inform the American people about what we do.
Yeah.
And so that has to be a part. Think back to the early ops in Afghanistan, when it seemed like every time an airstrike went in, the Taliban would say, "Oh, the dirty, rotten scoundrel Americans, they've just bombed another wedding party."
Yeah.
And we knew exactly what we hit, but God forbid that we should show that kind of stuff because, oh, that's all classified. Well, let's kind of open the sight picture a little bit. To whom are we communicating? Because we knew we weren't being war criminals,
Mhm.
but the bad guy was winning the PR
It's
fight.
the loudest voice in the room.
And that's exactly right. So how do we factor that into our writing, what we write to our subordinates, what we have the public affairs officer or our commanders, when Christian I'm a disaster sticks the microphone in your face because you get encountered on the street corner somewhere, dodging bullets, and you get asked the real tough question. Got to be able to think through that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, Kevin, I was thinking too, you mentioned modeling writers. You mentioned like, hey, you got to prepare yourself for these orders. You threw out a couple names. Vasta Zega is amazing. I love the whole renaissance of the late 70s, early 80s, where they came up with the 100, the 101. I mean, I love it. It's the operations Bible, right? Um,
Indeed.
uh, so one of my biggest celebrities from that region that I constantly go back to, and this is one of my research methodologies, is General Don Starry, and he wrote his memoirs, Press On, volumes 1 and 2. I mean, like, there's not a problem that I'm dealing with today that guy didn't write about in his memoirs, and I will pull up those PDFs, and I'll type in whatever problem I'm dealing with, and it comes up with like he commented on something about that. And
Indeed.
yeah, it's just it's about being informed, right? And he was the TRADOC chief for a long time, and so he was dealing stuff at the highest level and dealing with problems down at some of the lowest echelon. And it surprised me how well he could say something at his level and it filtered down to the bottom. Like, like so I guess my that's a long way of me asking, when you get these operations orders out, how do you help to ensure the readability, right? How do you help to make sure that they do get to the lowest level? Because I mean, sometimes I get operations orders from higher headquarters, and I'm like, I don't have time for that right now. I'll read it later, and then maybe I never get around to reading it, and then I pay the price for it later. But it's like part of it's a balance between, hey, it's got to have a certain air of readability to it.
Hey, again, this is me reading.
Yeah.
Readability. You ever hear the story about Napoleon's corporal, where supposedly Murat, who was Napoleon's chief of staff, had a corporal in the headquarters, and he would read every directive or missive that came out of the emperor's tent for readability. My NCOIC at Third Army, top Panor, top read. I made sure he read everything. Now he is a very educated guy, but he was my senior NCO, and I really did.
Yeah.
When I was at 18th Airborne Corps writing plans, we had a couple of really terrific NCOs, and I roped those guys in. It's like, no, you guys aren't just going to worry about just all the supply and who digs the fox, all that stuff. You're going to read all these orders that we're putting out, and again, it wasn't just to be a jerk, but it was, are we communicating well, guys? If you ended up in command, would you understand what the heck's going on? It really did that, and I tried to be inclusive too, to make sure that something would go out, but everyone on the plans team had a chance to read at least the basic parts of the order, the essential parts of the order. It's amazing what you'll find when you do that. General McKiernan, after we wrote Cobra 2, he gave me Christmas Day off of 2002. And then on the day after Christmas, we convened, and I wrote about this in the book, but it was an amazing experience. We convened a group, all the staff principals who were general officers at Third Army, and we did a page-by-page review of the order. And the order, annexes, appendices, tabs, and enclosures. And we reduced the size of the order to what could be transmitted, and again, to ensure readability. Now, we had the time to do that, but when your J3 is then Major General J.D. Thurman, and J.D. announces that he is going to read the base order and the operations annex, you better believe that everybody in the J3 was going to read it, because no one wanted to be on the receiving end of one of JD's chest thumping, just one-way discussions. It was fun to work with him. He was great.
Yeah. Not good. Well, hey, Roundtable, I know I've been consuming Kevin here, so I'll turn it over to you guys. What else do we have for Kevin today? I know you guys got some stuff on your minds.
Yeah, I was going to ask the evolution of the orders process. Obviously, been around a long time and seen a lot of orders that were produced from the strategic down to the tactical level. One of the most infamous myths is the D-Day order was 3 pages. I think it was actually about 6. But how do you think where have we gone wrong in the orders production process, where an operation like D-Day could be 6 pages long, and now we've got, to your point, base orders, appendices, annexes. It turns into a 100-page document. We've talked about the flexibility that subordinate commanders have. Are we not balancing that correctly anymore, or what are your thoughts, sir?
Again, this is my personal opinion, but I think a lot of that has to do with the instant information environment that we're living in. I recall when I was in Iraq the second time reading about an operation that took place in Afghanistan, where a battalion commander, anticipating a X number of days, say 10, I don't remember exactly, day operation, but he made contact with the enemy, excuse me, and kept his outfit on operation for, X plus X number of days. Again, I don't remember. But he destroyed that enemy outfit. And along the way, he took some casualties, because that's what happens in war. We all know this.
Mhm.
And of course, that was the story that instead of going back to base camp after 10 days, they stayed out, and oh my God, soldiers got killed. And so instead of getting a Distinguished Service Cross, I thought, from what I read, and I was reading other stuff too, he faced an Article 15-6 investigation. And I think that was because, again, we want to make sure that when, I guessed we wanted to make sure that when an American soldier got killed, that we understood everything that happened. Again, think back to, oh God, now I've spaced his name, but the NFL player who got killed, that was friendly fire. It turned out to
Pat
be,
Tillman, yeah.
the Tillman
Pat
thing.
Tillman, yeah.
And so the Army, in its wisdom, wanted to avoid embarrassment, so we do investigations of everything. And I think that started the ball, personally. This is just Kevin Benson. I think that started the ball rolling, where, okay, we want to make sure that we document as much as we can, or we overclassify things because we're embarrassed. And I think that lent itself to, in our real desire, our good intended desire to be as thorough as possible,
Yeah.
leads to, all sorts of, lengthy orders and cutting and pasting of regulations into appendices, annexes, tabs, and enclosures, instead of what's really necessary to conduct operations.
Yeah, I'll tell on myself a little bit. Then Major Clifton was our XO at 4th of the 133rd, our HIMARS battalion. When I was the AS3 and was doing orders production for the battalion, and I was infamous for saying, they should know that. I don't need to spell that out in the battalion order down to the batteries. They should
Right.
know that they have to feed their people 3 times a day. I shouldn't have to tell them that, right? So I think you're right, sir. It became more of a, hey, I have to spell everything out in the operations order. So on the back end, if something happened, I have some cover that I said that you guys need to do it this way specific. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I 100%, sir. But we've lost that freedom of maneuver that we've talked about, and we've kind of handcuffed our subordinates a little bit with their own freedom of maneuver.
And you see,
Matt
you're
Cox's
exactly
opinion.
right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. Now, that's again, when we war gamed Cobra 2, 2 echelons below a field army is a division. And I asked all my officers, okay, how does a division fight? And I got the blank stare. What's that horn in the middle of your forehead for, Colonel? Uh, and and so you had to put my instructor hat on, and okay, divisions fight in this way. And why do we war game divisions? Because we're writing tasks to 3-star level commanders at corps. And so there again, the doctrinal language, so that we don't need to explain what attack in zone means. We don't need to explain defeat. The 51st Mechanized Division, Iraqi Army. And again, it comes back to what we talked about. That establishes, here's your zone, these are the tasks, this is the doctrinal language we use, and we're not telling you how to do something. Oop, there's that patent one. Don't tell someone how to do something. Tell them what you want done. Let them surprise you with their initiative.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes courage. Takes courage on the part of the general staff writing the order and on the commander to underwrite the execution.
And building in the checks and balances on the back end with back briefs or whatever else to
Here,
ensure
here.
that the commander's intent is being met.
Here, here.
Colonel Hildebrand routinely lets us do that here at the DeVarty. I think we come up short most of the time, but we keep trying. He keeps letting us.
Well, and just the DeVarty, I was active when we took DeVarty's apart. What a stupid idea.
Here, yeah.
And now we had to rebuild DeVarty's. And what is it that a division artillery does for the division? And there's in probably all components of the Army, there's a level of experience that is gone now, and there are probably brigade commanders who think that, well, that's my artillery battalion. I have to train it. If I don't have it under my control, I'll never get FA fires. So, well, lighten up, Francis. I'm dating myself. I'm sorry.
No.
But but see here again, how do we communicate that? We have to write it down, and we have to communicate it effectively.
Yeah, that's good. All right. What do you say, TJ Clifton? So Kevin, TJ is our resident PhD guy. He's working on his PhD right now. So in between writing op orders for the Joint Force Headquarters as a J through 3, he also spends a lot of time in the library researching his PhD. TJ, what you got for us, my man?
Well, I keep being told that the orders don't have enough information, so I'm going to go with Matt Cox and say they should know.
They should know
from now on. But I will say that I think when you're doing a commander's intent, one of the things that I think helps you craft it as well is knowing your subordinate commanders. Mm-hmm. Right, because then you know, writing it, what you're going to get out of them based off of it's like having multiple kids, right?
Yeah.
No two are the same.
Right.
If you write it too vague, then you're going to have one of your batteries in a different country accidentally on purpose, and then the other guy's sitting waiting for more information, right? So I think that's the human part of it, where people have a different idea of what initiative is, right? I said it today on the Ops Sync. What we did as far as a requirement that's coming from National Guard Bureau, the way the leadership approached it, we are in a better position than the other 54 at this moment, right? So it's the disciplined initiative, mm-hmm. right? But I will say that there are moments when you're vague in an order that it can ripple. And I've had multiple units, they got to stay out at Oro Grande overnight because they couldn't get firing data. And they just happened to be the night that a blizzard blew in. But none of the subordinate commanders planned for staying overnight because they thought they were going to get to shoot and leave. So it was a learning experience.
Yeah.
We learned by pain and repetition. I wonder, like, if you have copies of some of the original writings, and if you ever compare them to where you are now as a writer and see like the growth based off of either positions you held or life experiences that you went through, like where were your big growth moments throughout your career?
Ooh. First of all, yeah, I have made a concerted effort to go back and to find a lot of the stuff that I've written, just because I was curious for just this reason you cited. How have I changed? What have I observed? I wrote just the ones that stand out to me was the first article I ever got published in Army magazine was I called it a battalion command AAR, and I titled it "If I Knew Then What I Know Now."
Mhm.
And I wrote about reflecting on 2 years of battalion command. Then I wrote one about called "How to Be a Colonel." That was also published, thinking about the advice I got when I was selected for promotion to colonel and what I'd observed in other colonels and things that I felt a colonel had to do. So those were moments in my life when I reflected and I thought, well, the best thing I can do is to try to capture what I went through and just put it out there and see if that had helped somebody. But it is kind of interesting to go back and look at the what I wrote as a captain and what was important as a captain company commander or CAS Cube graduate, being on a brigade staff. And I'm sorry, CAS Cube no longer exists, Combined Arms and Services Staff School. It was a bring every captain in the Army to Leavenworth for, God, how long was I there? Just a month, a couple of months to learn how to be a staff officer before going to a staff. And the perspective of what's the old adage, where you sit determines where you stand. And where I sat at the time influenced what I saw. And I wrote one article that I don't think it ever got published, but it was how not to write an OER, because I was an assignment officer at Armor Branch, and I worked in the personnel center for 3 years. The most miserable 3 years of my career. But reading OERs every day and seeing how poorly people, well-intentioned people, but how poorly people would communicate,
Yeah.
really made me, okay, I need to write about this.
We need you to publish that one so we can mass distro it. Definitely.
Correct.
I'm gonna. I've got it. There were, honest to God, I one of the things that really, I would read these OERs and it was sitting in a chair in a cubicle, and this one line made me laugh so hard, I tipped over in my chair, and I looked up to see the colonel that I worked for looking down at me, and he said, "Well, Captain Benson, why don't you bring that OER into my office so I can laugh too?" It's like, okay, sir. And it was some guy trying to be trying to pump up a guy's OER, and he wrote, and the words were, "This officer is a model for cadets in this dimension." And I think, I wonder what dimension he's thinking about. The fourth dimension. And it was, don't use your thesaurus when you're writing an OER. But again, what are we talking about? Writing effectively, communicating effectively.
Yeah.
That was creative.
Did the colonel laugh?
It was creative writing, and it obviously stuck with you.
Well,
Yes.
I tried to be careful when I wrote OERs, I assure you.
So, hey, you mentioned the phrase "where you sit is how you see." Another phrase I think kind of goes hand with that is what got you here won't get you there, right?
Yeah, I read that book too.
Yeah, yeah, it's the growth piece, right?
Exactly.
And you talk about some pivotal moments in your career. I mean, I remember thinking back, one of the hardest things I ever wrote, it was for my master's program, it's called a crucible paper, where you have to take a moment, a reflection, right? These reflections, these deeply personal events in your life, and you have to reflect on it, and you say, hey, what was your crucible moment? And then, like, how did you come out of it? I mean, it shaped you who you are today. And uh, I, I mean, without sharing too much personal, but I mean, did you have some type of crucible moment where you're like, a light bulb clicked off? It really changed, who you are, or it kind of shaped your future self until, like, this is who now I know the direction I need to head.
Yeah, there were several of those.
Yeah.
There was a lieutenant moment when one of my less than stellar soldiers leaned across the top of the 113, blew cigarette smoke in my face, and told me to go have unnatural relations with my mother. And
Yeah.
well, there was that moment. In the aftermath of that moment, it was, holy cow, I need to rein in my temper.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sure.
and there was another one. And the first time you see somebody die
Mhm.
is pretty powerful. And I witnessed that through a video feed from a predator that somebody else had launched a missile and had killed a bunch of Iraqis.
Mhm.
And, I see the explosion, and then you watch that body cool. That, boy,
Yeah.
this is
Sobering.
for real.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the last one that I'll share is now I'm a colonel, I'm a general staff officer, a principal staff officer. I'm not crossing the line of departure, going into harm's way. And I ran into one of the young men who was a lieutenant in my battalion, who's now a company commander, and he's real proud of being a company commander. And I know exactly, he doesn't know yet. I know exactly where he's going and exactly what he's going to face.
Yeah.
And you don't think that I went back and I read that order again just to make damn sure that it communicated. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, those moments. But you also have to have the ability in yourself, like, to experience it, reflect on it,
Yeah.
and recognize if something needs to be changed or something needs to be reinforced. And that takes, what's
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah.
When I taught at the Army School for Critical Thinking, the Red Team School, we talked about your personal frame, kind of like what got you here won't get you there. And it's, if you think of what your frame is, what constitutes the side of your frame? How does that influence what you see? And what does it prevent you from seeing? And we use that as a device to make sure that you bring other people into decision-making processes, because their frame will allow them to see something that you might not be able
Yeah.
to see.
That's amazing. Well, hey, Kev, we've reached the top of the hour, brother. I mean, I am surprised how fast this went. Usually, I do these things, and we get the most boring people on here. No, I'm just kidding. We always have, Matt does a great job of really lining up an incredible lineup. So, man, we usually close it out with any final parting advice that our guests would like to offer up, and then we pretty much send everybody on their way, because it is the lunch hour, and they're doing this as a
Sure.
brown bag lunch and learn. So, what do you got for us, my man, Kev? Any
Hey,
final advice?
you know, you've all heard this, I'm sure. Take your job seriously, don't take yourself seriously.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to laugh than to get all caught, you know, especially in the environment we're living in today. Judas Priest. Don't take yourself real seriously. Just take the job seriously.
Yeah.
And you know, there's one thing, and I hope no one ever faces it, but you know, I've heard this in many forms, in many ways, but over the extent of a career, do you want to be right or do you want to be promoted?
Yeah.
And sometimes telling the truth to power is something we're morally obligated to do. You do it tactfully, but
Yeah.
you know, you have to. At some point, we're going to face that. Maybe, maybe not, but
Yeah.
that's what I kept in the back of my head, and
Yeah.
you know, throughout 30 years of service in
Yeah.
active duty.
Well, amen, brother. Thank you for your time today.
My privilege.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing what you guys what you produce next. So have a
Well,
great day.
book
And
2
that's
is
it for today.
coming. Book 2 is coming out on 1 February. It's
All
a
right.
the history of the School of Advanced Military Studies.
Oh man,
Awesome.
I love it.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks,
Thanks
sir.
a lot, y'all. Thanks for doing what you do.